Yeyote aliye na kinga hafifu mwilini yuko katika hatari ya kuambukizwa COVID-19. Hao ni kama watu ambao wanaishi na magonjwa kama vile virusi vya HIV, kansa, TB, kisukari, miongoni mwa magonjwa mengine. Lazima wazingatie matibabu ili kuboresha kinga mwilini. Lazima wahakikishe wamepata dawa ipasavyo. Tembelea kliniki yako au kituo cha afya kilicho karibu nawe kwa maelezo kamili kuhusu jinsi ya kupata dawa. Pia wasaidie jamaa na rafiki kupata dawa. Dumisha mawasiliano nao na ufuate mwongozo wa kiafya kutoka kwa kituo cha afya ili kujikinga na virusi vya korona. Pata habari kuhusu COVID-19 kupitia vyanzo vinavyoaminika. Piga 719 au bonyeza *719#. COVID-19 inazuilika. Jilinde, linda familia na jamii. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwako na serikali ya Kenya.
Here is the plan, but where are the billions? Good evening and thank you very much for your time. Tonight on Inside Government, on Business Inside actually, we break down Yatani's budget billions right here on the show. My name is O'Brien Kimani. The unrivaled coverage of today's budget briefing starts right now on KBC Channel 1. We are live and of course we are online from Broadcasting House. We look critically at the budget and, of course, the issues that affect you from now going into the future. My name is O'Brien Kimani. At O'Brien Kimani is my Twitter handle. At KBC Channel 1. Highlights are coming up next.
Total expenditures in the financial year 2020-21 are projected at Kenya shilling 2.79 trillion, or 24.7% of GDP.
Kenya's 2.79 trillion shillings budget. Some tax relief measures likely to be withdrawn as focus shifts to funding expenditure. Budget winners and losers. Government waives KCPE and KCSE examination fees, while motorists will spend more to access major roads. And it's a shot in the arm for the Ministry of Health after Treasury allocates 101.7 billion shillings, part of which will be used to combat COVID-19. And of course, we're in the company of our sign language interpreter, Larissa Odingo. Welcome to the program. The 2.79 trillion shillings budget unveiled by National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani mainly focused on stimulating the economy to safeguard livelihoods, jobs and businesses. The government plans to employ 200,000 youth under the Kazi Mtaani program, 15,000 teachers and 5,000 health workers, as Betty Kiptum reports.
A walk into Parliament chambers to present the 2.79 trillion shillings budget. The budget seeks to minimize the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic by stimulating job creation as well as supporting businesses.
Many micro, small, medium enterprises are unlikely to attract affordable and quality credit under the traditional arrangements. Mr. Speaker, in order to de-risk lending to the micro, small and medium enterprise, I have set aside shilling 3 billion seed capital to operationalize the credit guarantee scheme. The scheme will enable the provision of affordable credit in an efficient and structured manner.
With a 10 billion shillings allocation to the Kazi Mtaani program, the government is looking to employ at least 200,000 youths. 4.7 billion shillings will be channeled towards employment of 5,000 teachers, a further 10,000 intern teachers, and 1,000 ICT interns to support digital learning in public schools. 1.2 billion shillings will open up recruitment for 5,000 healthcare workers next year.
Evidently, the COVID-19 pandemic has overstretched our healthcare system. The government has made significant efforts to contain the spread of the virus through various protocols and containment measures, which entail promotion of hygiene and restriction of movements. Mr. Speaker, building on these measures in a way that ensures more Kenyans are again fully engaged and support local industries, and to further enhance capacity of the healthcare system, Kenya 1.2 billion is proposed for the recruitment of an additional cohort of 5,000 healthcare workers. The objective is to get thousands of unemployed teachers off the bench and into action as intern teachers, while also supporting local artisans and builders' businesses. To meet this commitment, Kenya 7.4 billion has been proposed.
Those who had not declared and paid taxes over the last 5 years also received a reprieve.
To enhance tax compliance, I propose to introduce a voluntary disclosure program to allow Kenyans who in the last 5 years may have inadvertently made omissions in their tax returns to voluntarily disclose such omission and pay tax due. The program will run for 3 years. I further propose to grant relief for penalties and interest in respect of the tax disclosed after payment of the principal tax.
3 billion shillings will go into a farm input subsidy program that will see 200,000 small-scale farmers benefiting. The government's Big Four agenda received a 128.3 billion shillings, with the health docket receiving the biggest chunk at 111.7 billion shillings. Just how is the government planning to finance the budget? KRA is expected to collect 1.63 trillion shillings, ministerial development expenditures, including foreign-financed projects, at 633.1 billion shillings, and the 842.7 billion shillings deficit bridged through borrowing. Betty Kiptum, Channel 1 News.
Relief program by the group of 20 richest countries due to stringent conditions. In his post-budget briefing, National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani said Kenya is not facing debt servicing crisis that warrants debt restructuring. In April, the group of 20 richest countries outlined a debt relief program targeting developing economies in an attempt to free 2.2 trillion shillings to help struggling economies deal with the COVID-19 pandemic.
I captured in my statement that this year we were looking at 5.4, but we are unlikely to realize that. The growth is going to go down to 2.5% of GDP, to, if we are lucky, to 3%. But you know, how do you context this in the space of the global economy? Most economies of the world are actually registering negative growth. We are lucky in the region that our economy is quite diversified and fortified against these challenges. So we will not expect to go lower than 2.5 unless something worse than this happens. Regarding debt relief, we appreciate the initiative of the G20 and the multilateral financial institution to press for a debt moratorium for about 6-7 months, up to December. We've carefully looked at it. We are happy with the proposal, but based on circumstance, we are still not sure, and we are looking at, we are trying to push for better terms, better concessions, because what's happening is that some of the conditions attendant to debt relief are quite punitive, because it will block us from further borrowing. It will also give us a challenge already with the bonds that we have, particularly the Eurobond and the rest.
In terms of the superannuation, we've already put in 10 billion shillings, and we are proposing this in the budget of 2020-2021, so that we can also tie this to the pensions reform that we are looking at in the pension sector, so that all of this go together. And so we are committed, we are clear, and we want to make sure that we've got a good pension system that works. Now, the other question that has been posed to us is about alcohol and the tax on alcohol. From an economics point of view, the demand for alcohol is inelastic, which means as you increase the price, the volume that people consume of alcohol does not change significantly. And so, informed by that economics, it's an area where we are clear in terms of raising revenue. We can raise revenue through alcohol consumption and taxing alcohol.
Still on budget matters, and the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani told the National Treasury that funding the 2.79 trillion shillings budget was not a walk in the park. Of these, KRA has been tasked to collect 1.63 trillion shillings, which is an addition to appropriations in aid will push ordinary revenue to 1.89 trillion shillings. Ministerial development expenditures, including foreign financed projects, is 633 billion shillings, leaving a fiscal budget of 840 billion shillings to be financed through foreign as well as domestic debt.
Prepared under a tough economic background characterized by the COVID-19 disruptions, locust invasion, and floods that wreaked havoc across the country, the 2.79 trillion shillings budget has been termed as ambitious.
Micro, small, and medium enterprises. Despite their important contribution, this sector has continued to face challenges of accessing credit due to lack of sufficient collateral, high cost of credit, and informal business structure. These challenges have been worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic.
There are fears that ordinary revenue could be negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic due to closure of some businesses, reduced demand, and reduced imports, which will impact custom collections.
The fiscal framework for 2020-21 budget and the medium term has been revised to take into account the adverse impacts of the pandemic on revenue performance.
Yet in his maiden budget presentation, Treasury CS, Okurietani tasked the taxman to collect 1.63 trillion shillings.
The 2020-21 budget targets revenue collection, including appropriation in aid, of Kenya shilling 1.89 trillion, which is equivalent to 16.8% of GDP. This is a stagnation from the estimated revenues of Kenya shilling 1.89 trillion, equivalent to 18.6% of GDP in the financial year 2019-2020. Of these, ordinary revenues in the financial year 2020-21 are projected at Kenya shilling 1.63 trillion, equivalent to 14.5% of GDP.
Yatani appealed to legislators to pass the proposed Finance Bill 2020.
In this respect, I have proposed further removal of some existing tax exemptions through the Finance Bill 2020. I urge honorable members of this House to support this endeavor that's expected to grow revenues for funding critical social and infrastructure programs.
He hinted that tax relief measures introduced in March to cushion Kenyans against COVID-19 could be revised if the situation improves.
As noted earlier in my statement, in order to cushion Kenyans against the adverse impact of the pandemic and to further increase liquidity in the economy, the government lowered tax rates for corporate and personal incomes, turnover tax, value-added tax, and provided tax relief to low-income earners and employees. These measures are estimated to cost the Exchequer Kenya shilling 172 billion in revenue foregone by government in one financial year.
With a fiscal deficit of 840.6 billion shillings, the government plans to borrow 493 billion shillings locally and another 347 billion shillings externally.
In the financial year 2020-21, the fiscal deficit of Kenya shilling 840.6 billion will be financed through net external financing of Kenya shilling 347 billion or 3.1% of GDP, net financing of Kenya shilling 493.4 billion or 4.4% of GDP, and other net domestic repayment of Kenya shilling 627 million.
Given that the taxman has been missing its revenue targets over the years, the onus now will fall on the taxman to move the bulk of that particular 2.7 trillion shillings budget. If it is sustainable and attainable, time will tell. I'm Regina Manyara reporting for Channel 1 Business.
And of course, we'll be scraping the surface to see how exactly that story pans out, because the work ahead is absolutely tough. You are likely to continue to enjoy the lower tax rate introduced by the government in March this year to cushion Kenyans against the adverse effects of the coronavirus pandemic if legislators reject a proposal from the National Treasury to review some of the tax breaks. National Treasury CS Ukuru Yatani, however, says the tax breaks, including lower VAT at the rate of 14% and income tax of up to 25%, should be reviewed because some benefits are not being trickled to consumers, as Benson Rioba observes.
To cushion Kenyans from effects of COVID-19 pandemic, President Uhuru Kenyatta announced various tax relief measures such as a lower VAT of 14%, reduced income tax and corporate tax of up to 25%. The tax relief measures, which were viewed as a short-term measure, could run indefinitely if Parliament rejects proposal by the National Treasury to review the tax breaks.
A review of the existing laws incentive regime with a view to minimizing distortions and providing a level playing ground for all taxpayers. In this respect, I have proposed further removal of some existing tax exemptions through the Finance Bill 2020. I urge honorable members of this House to support this endeavor that's expected to grow revenues for funding critical social and infrastructure programs.
To rejuvenate the economy, Yatani has proposed 10 billion shillings for employment of 200,000 youths under the Kazi Mtaani program in major towns across the country.
I propose to allocate Kenya shilling 5 billion for rehabilitation of the damaged access roads and footbridges. Further, Mr. Speaker, to address the issue of youth unemployment and empowerment in urban informal settlement, I have set aside Kenya shilling 10 billion under the Kazi Mtaani program.
Parents and guardians are also a happy lot after the government allocated 4 billion shillings for waiving examination fee for KCP and KCSE students and employment of 15,000 teachers in efforts to reduce the teacher-learner ratio.
Kenya shilling 4 billion for examination fees waiver for all Class 8 and Form 4 candidates. Kenya shilling 800 million for the digital literacy program and competency-based curriculum.
To reduce reliance on foreign contractors for key infrastructural projects, Yatani said plans are underway to review the procurement policy framework in the construction sector in favor of awarding tenders to local contractors, which is expected to employ more Kenyans.
The government will review the contracting framework for infrastructure projects in the country with a view of ensuring participation of local contractors in local contracts. These will retain domestic revenues within the country and create jobs for the youth contractors.
Pensioners are also a happy lot after the government has committed to clear all pension payment backlog by December this year.
National Treasury is re-engineering and upgrading the pension systems in order to clear all pension payments backlog by the end of the calendar year. This will pave way for modernized pension management system that will guarantee smooth transition of retirees from a monthly salary check to a monthly pension payment.
Benson Rioba reporting for Channel 1 Business.
And motorists will dig deeper into their pockets if they are to continue enjoying using major highways. National Treasury CS Ukuru Yatani said in his 2020-2021 budget reading statement that the government is in the... I take that again. Motorists will dig deeper into their pockets if they are to continue enjoying using major highways. National Treasury CS Ukuru Yatani said in his 2020-2021 budget reading statement that the government, in its efforts to encourage public-private partnerships in funding major roads, will streamline policies that will allow contractors to bill motorists directly.
Kenyans lose about 50 million shillings daily to traffic jams, according to the Kenya National Highways Authority estimates. To this end, the government entered into a public-private partnership model for funding infrastructure projects that will see Kenyans pay to use major roads. National Treasury CS Ukuru Yatani has now given an update on efforts to see motorists directly pay for road use.
The government has been encouraging investments under the public-private partnership, particularly in the road sector. To further such partnerships, I propose to amend the Public Roads Toll Act to enable the persons who enter into an agreement with the government to collect road tolls on roads constructed and managed under such agreements.
Other losers in this year's budget statement include the growing number of internet users. With the call to stay at home due to the coronavirus pandemic, e-commerce has seen a significant rise. To this, the government plans to actualize a digital service tax of 1.5%.
With the first advancement in technology, many business transactions are increasingly being carried out through digital platforms. In some cases, due to the nature of the transaction, it is difficult to effectively tax the income derived through such platforms. It is therefore necessary to provide a framework that will facilitate taxation of such income. In this regard, I propose to introduce digital service tax on the value of transactions at the rate of 1.5%.
The tax will see users pay more for digital services, including the buying of goods online, as the government looks to tap the lucrative sector for vital revenue. Another cadre of losers in this year's budget is property owners, earning more than 15 million shillings in rental income after being added to the tax bracket and given a 10% tax on their rental income.
The government introduced a simplified monthly rental income tax in 2016 to enhance tax compliance. Under this regime, the rental income is taxed at the rate of 10% for individuals earning annual rent income of Kenya shilling 10 million and below. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya shilling 10 million per annum threshold has brought positive impact on tax compliance. I therefore propose to raise this threshold to Kenya shilling 15 million per annum in order to bring more landlords to the simplified regime.
This might see property owners pass the tax burden to consumers renting their properties in order to cushion themselves from the new tax. Alan Aoko, Channel 1 News.
It was his maiden budget speech, and it was unique in many ways. More details are coming right here. We are taking a short break, and thereafter we are back with more. Stay right here.
The Kenya Film Commission is glad to announce that the third edition of My Kenya, My Story mobile phone film competition received over 250 submissions. The call for submissions closed on the 3rd of June 2020. From the submissions, 20 top films will be shortlisted for public voting. You are encouraged to watch and vote for your favorite short film, which will be done via the Kenya Film Commission YouTube platform. The winner of the best short film will walk away with 200,000 Kenya shillings, while the first and the second runners-up will receive 150,000 Kenya shillings and 100,000 Kenya shillings respectively. Voting runs from 17th June 2020 through to 26th June 2020. The winner will be announced on 30th June 2020. Kenya Film Commission. Film Kenya. Capture Africa. Top on Channel 1. Yote aliye na kinga hafifu mwilini yuko katika hatari ya kuambukizwa COVID-19.
It's Chaparro.
However, whether the twin lives or dies is out of my hands now. I can't make that decision, but I can be in control of something else.
COVID-19 inazuilika. Jilinde, linda familia na jamii.
I'm Cyrus.
My God, that's them.
Wow!
Ooh, a porch swing. I know what I'm doing this weekend.
I can't let go of this. Oh, grody.
Hello, this is Dr. Patel. Why aren't you not picking up my call? Koja kwanza, wewe mimi na kama napigia wewe simu, wewe pana chukua simu. Wewe nataka advance salary, wewe nakuja ofisi, mimi napatia wewe advance 50,000.
Kupata advance, bonyeza star 811 star 817 hash.
Anakula mugoka na bana kingia kazi.
Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam alituamrisha tuwe tutafunga siku 3 katika kila mwezi. Akasema Sayyiduna Abu Dharr al-Ghafari radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu ni kufunga tarehe 13, tarehe 14 na tarehe 15 katika kalenda ambayo kwamba ni kalenda ya Hijiria, kalenda hii ya Kiislamu. You forgive all those who seek you. Who do I call if it's not you?
Welcome back. This year's budget day was low-key with minimal splendor and displays in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Treasury building was filled with security was heightened in and around the building. This as a section of Kenyans stepped out to visualize the journey to 2020-2021 budget reading as enumerated by Muchuma.
Treasury building Thursday. Kenyan patriotic songs rent the air. Decors glare at the entrance to a building that hosts the office of the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury and National Planning, Ukur Yatani. Red carpet neatly kept, flower bouquets stood out amid heightened security. Final touches were also evident at Treasury, perhaps to ensure best moments are captured by journalists outside the building and pedestrians alike. This child captured our hearts with his outstanding talent. A song dedicated to our leaders. A few minutes to 2:30 p.m., Okoriatani made his way out with the historic briefcase. It is his first budget speech as Finance Cabinet Secretary since his appointment to that position last year. The anxiety around this budget among Kenyans was palpable, especially with the current harsh economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, activities around Treasury and Parliament prior to the speech gripped their attention. It was not the usual packed National Assembly. A social distancing requirement under the COVID-19 prevention measures left the House half empty.
The government will put in place appropriate policies and administrative measures.
And after a 1.5-hour speech, Yatani exited the chambers, apparently heaving a sigh of relief for a job well done. Though this year's budget day was low-key, away from splendor and display, a few Kenyans would not miss to step out. There are hopes that the resolutions on this day would be of great benefit to them. Irene Mchuma Odim, Channel 1 in the county of Nairobi.
And the Ministry of Health will receive 101.7 billion shillings from Treasury to finance its activities in the year 2020-2021 financial year. To mitigate the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, 500 million shillings will be used to procure 20,000 locally manufactured beds to cope with the increasing number of patients. Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani, while presenting the national budget, indicated that the healthcare system currently is overstretched by the pandemic.
The health sector, which is bearing the brunt of the coronavirus, has been allocated 111.7 billion shillings. The sector is one of the prioritized in the economic stimulus program to help improve health outcomes and sustain economic activities. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, the government, in its key areas of urgency, allocated funds to public hospitals and health institutions to improve health service delivery, and Kenyatta National Hospital will receive 15 billion shillings. Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, 10 billion shillings. Kenya Medical Training Centers have received 7.2 billion shillings, 2.5 billion shillings for Kenya Medical Research Institute, KEMRI. Mathare Hospital has been allocated 1.2 billion shillings, with another 4.3 billion shillings set aside as conditional grant to level 5 hospitals in counties.
Kenya shilling 50.3 billion is for activities and programs for the attainment of universal health coverage by the drivers and enablers. Mr. Speaker, the budget for the health sector includes Kenya shilling 19.2 billion to address and lower cases of HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis in the country. Kenya shilling 6.2 billion for the managed service equipment. Kenya shilling 5.3 billion to transform the healthcare systems for universal health coverage.
In the 2020-2021 budget, 1.2 billion shillings will be used for the recruitment of an additional cohort of 5,000 healthcare workers to support health staff for a period of 1 year. This in addition to the 1,000 healthcare workers employed as the pandemic struck the country.
The COVID-19 pandemic has overstretched our healthcare system. The government has made significant efforts to contain the spread of the virus through various protocols and containment measures, which entail promotion of hygiene and restriction of movements.
A total of 500 million shillings will be spent in supplying 20,000 locally made beds and beddings to public hospitals. The horticultural industry, which has been adversely affected since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic across the globe, has received 1.5 billion shillings to assist flower and horticultural farmers access international markets at a period when the country is experiencing low cargo traffic.
These interventions will support and sustain the farming communities as they will provide employment to thousands of workers in our agricultural sector. I have set aside Kenya shilling 3 billion to subsidize the supply of farm inputs through the e-voucher system to reach 200,000 small-scale farmers.
Kamche Menza for Channel 1 News.
Tell you what, presenting the budget was the easier part. The work ahead is now tough. Sourcing for the trillions in a bid to bankroll the budget. And the question is, how will the government do this in an environment whereby investors are in a pause mode and the domestic market here in Kenya is not very conducive for exchequer borrowing at a time when the government is urging commercial banks to extend their lending arm to the private sector in a bid to stimulate economic growth. And the question is, what magic and tricks will the National Treasury pull in a bid to finance that budget? I've got two gentlemen in the house who are willing to respond to those questions plus more. David Kingo is an investment analyst from Saiton. Thank you so much, David, for joining us. He is on my... This is left. Yeah, this is left. He's on my left. Hi, David. How are you doing?
I'm so fine.
You well?
Very fine.
Beautiful. Where were you when the budget was read?
So I've been following it through mainstream channels to just understand what it's...
You don't say mainstream here. You say KBC.
KBC.
Very well. Welcome and feel warm. And Elvis Ogeto is a partner at RSM East Africa. He's also joining us here. Elvis, it's good to see you this rainy evening. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. Despite the weather
and COVID. I mean, you're safe here, and of course you're warm here.
Thank you.
You have that guarantee. And I want to shoot straight to these two gentlemen. I mean, I want to hit at one of you. I mean, first of all, it was the first time that Ukuru Yatani, stood before the world and presented Kenya's budget for the year 2020-2021. We have seen many before him. Elvis, how do you rate his delivery, first of all?
Thank you very much. I believe there is a sense of confidence inspired after what we have seen previously in terms of especially where the government has not done well, implementation of austerity measures. Even before COVID-19 checked in, we saw Ambassador Yatani coming in very forcefully, implementing austerity measures and innovative ways of trying to raise more money into the coffers. For example, receipt of any dividends from state corporations, money that has been lying there that technically should come into the public coffers. As an accountant, I believe it's very difficult to plan or to budget in a pandemic situation. We wish him all the best. I believe when you look at the top line, the revenue amounts, that may be a bit ambitious considering the depressed economy. There's a sense of optimism that there will be a pickup in the second half of this year, which really is the beginning of the financial year.
Very well.
And of course, there needs to be close monitoring of budget or revenue targets as well as managing of the expenditures.
Hold your breath here. I'm coming back to you shortly, but I want to hear from King O. What do you make of everything that unfolded, in Parliament?
Of course, the Ukuru Shatani budget was very strategic and objective in terms of ensuring he opens up money supply to the economy. And that's why we are seeing every section of the ministerial allocation to every state agency, to every ministry. There is a section that is geared towards supplying money to the local mananchi. So, of course, it's trying to open up the economy that has been closed because of COVID-19 and what we have seen of late, whereby business are not operating. So it's trying to see how much it can pull from the government towards the people, that they can increase economic actions and try to generate revenue, of course, that government can tax and revenue for development expenditures, all that. So it was a mix of a very aggressive budget in terms of ensuring we have monetary executions, policies that have higher multiplier effect towards opening up the economy, because definitely the economy has been like to almost close down in terms of slow economic growth. So it was very objective for me, because it was quite aggressive on money supply to the people.
I have heard this from people. A lot of people are saying that yes, indeed, the text of this document is a little bit of ambitious, and bearing in mind that we are living in extraordinary time with coronavirus, the locust invasion, the flash floods, that impacted, the agricultural sector in this country. And of course, the looming global recession because of the coronavirus. Do you agree with them that indeed Treasury is pushing its luck too far?
Of course, there will be challenges in terms of revenue collection, but we've seen a section of the budget where the CS is proposing private and public partnership in terms of putting private investors towards cushioning the extent of how much revenue can be collected through KRA. Also, we have seen the Treasury trying to say that they are expecting slow economic growth. So definitely they'll be challenging in terms of financing the same. But then we have seen also the Treasury trying to say that we want to unlock all pending bills that are both in the national government and the county government. That is pushing money to the economy and trying to see what has been there existing and what people really deserve to have that should be already channeled to the public.
But it's good that you're bringing that issue, of pending, public, bills that are owed to the private sector. And this is coming out, like a chorus. We've been talking about these, and while we're still talking about this, the private sector is suffering out there. I have met young men and women who supplied to the government, more than 4 years ago, who supplied to the county governments more than 7 years ago. They are yet to be paid. Some of them, their businesses, have gone flat out. They have gone belly up. What are we going to do about this? Is there a one bullet kind of a situation whereby we can say we are going to deal with this for once and for all?
Of course, there's the need for some structural framework that ensure that, of course, these these bills are verified in terms of job what done and was done to what extent, and the payment certificate that are being submitted by the suppliers are valid to that extent. So of course then that is what has really delayed the process. But what we are seeing is that the government is very objective in terms of paying this particular debt. So the process is there. I think what the government is trying to do is to ensure that there is a structural framework to verify these particular debts. But once they are verified, of course money will be channeled to those who have suppliers or have done job with the government. So the same way I tell you about this VAT refund. So the government has really to verify whether it is legit that this money is specifically is owed to this particular taxpayer. So of course the structure of verifying is what will lead to that particular delay, because we would not want to a situation whereby the government is paying in suppliers that cannot validate. The government is paying corrupt suppliers who really did any job to that extent. So of course the structure of framework of ensuring the verification of the beneficiaries of these funds is what has to be the process. I mean, it's really authentic to that extent. Yes.
I know you don't hold brief for the government,
yes.
and I can see you know, Elvis is scratching his hands. Yes. I mean, Elvis, what do you want to throw?
Well, I will agree with him in terms of you know, improvement of the existing structures. Some of the initiatives taken, unfortunately, the problem we have seen is despite the laws being there, the regulations to enact these are not in place. For example, your Public Procurement Act was in place 2015, but it's only now that is tabling the regulations that will operationalize that. And hopefully when we go digital and everything is done electronically, that will obviously speed the process. The encouraging bit is the pressure is also putting on the county governments that there shall not be any further disbursements if they do not settle what is already outstanding as bills. So there's obviously pressure, and we hope we'll come to a time where there's quid pro quo. If KRA demands any taxes with interest and penalties, and therefore any verified amounts that should have been disbursed, released, should also attract some form of charge from government, and that will obviously put pressure on government to pay more promptly.
But you know, there are people who are asking this question: does the National Treasury has any legal basis, you know, to withhold funds to county governments that are yet to clear their debts? Do they have any?
To withhold the funds?
Yeah, I mean, we heard it from the CS saying that at some point, you know, the National Treasury may be forced to withhold funding to the county government that are yet, or that are withholding, or that are yet to clear pending bills. And the question is there any legal position that guides this kind of the decision?
I believe there's a bit of pressure, and you could see even from the feedback, you know, from the gallery that he received, to ensure that, you know, the liquidity is actually pumped into the economy. So there will be a bit of pressure to say, if you cannot account for what you have received, therefore you do not legitimately deserve to receive what needs to be disbursed in future. So account for what you have received before any more funds come your way.
Kingo, can you throw in a word or two in regard to that?
As you know, public finance, the spirit of Public Finance Act is accountability and trying to explain how you've spent what you've been given. So despite the legal backing that you want to really say that it's basically needed, the basic and the spirit of the Public Finance Act is accountability and giving value for money in terms of what you receive. So there is no business with the Treasury to giving people money and then they cannot account for what they have really received or what they have been previously disbursed. So the concept of accountability in the spirit of this Public Finance Act is exactly what the CS is trying to ask for. Yes. So it's not a question about whether we have a legal backing or not, but it is the responsibility of every accounting officer to ensure they have an accounting concept. They can really tell the National Treasury, they can really tell Kenyans that you gave us 316 billion as county government, and this is what you have specifically spent. You also seen even mainstream ministries, the PS being tasked to ensure that they clear all pending bills. And when you see the amount of money that has been locked in terms of pending bills, if it was really with the people in the economy, of course the multiplier effect would be great. But look at the cost that we're trying, the development growth that we are trying to forego because people have not been paid their pending bills. Of course, it beats logic then. It is about moral suasion. It's about the responsibility of the accounting officers to ensure that they account for what they have received before they get extra funding. Yes.
And I believe that, as a society, we should get to a point whereby we take stock of the impact that delaying or failing to pay suppliers, the kind of economic implication this has had on their businesses and, of course, on their social life. But away from that, there is also a proposal, from the CES to revise some of the tax proposals or some of the tax measures that were put in place sometimes in April to cushion Kenyans against the impact of coronavirus. Some of them, being lowering the value-added tax from 16 to 14, the personal relief from 30 to 5%, even though we had to know which taxes are likely to be impacted. But do you see members of parliament agreeing to this move, just like that, Elvis?
I believe it is too soon. There were obviously certain measures which interestingly were also reintroduced. So for example, when you talk about taxing pensioners, that was thrown out when there was the amendment bill in place, tax amendment bill in place. That has been reintroduced. So a lot of these measures that the members of parliament looked at and thought were a bit retrogressive are likely to obviously face a bit of stiff opposition. On the other hand, we've hardly introduced the lower taxes in terms of benefit. I know one of the issues obviously is if you're going to give any stimulus, it must be targeted. And the challenge may be here is that whether that actually trickles to the people that it is intended to benefit. For example, personal income taxes. There are a lot of people, on the worst case scenario, they wouldn't have even the income to benefit from the lower tax rate. So even if you reduce the lower tax rates, you're not benefiting those with income unless you introduce a stimulus package that will reach them. But when you look at it on the longer term portion, and really when you look at this budget, it's not just targeting the financial year in place, it's looking at being able to build up post the COVID era. So it may be too soon to do this. I know there may be concerns, especially with equalization of rates as well. When you look at ourselves, unfortunately, within the region, we have not been synchronized in terms of being able to have measures that will apply across the region. So for example, the 14% rate may not be something that has been applied within the other Eastern African member states. So that, together with the fact that it may not get to the people it is intended to benefit, may be one of the reasons that may be pushing him to review the rates. But I would look at it as a longer term into 2021, not something to be reviewed immediately.
And the question that is being thrown around is, is it not too soon, to gauge the impact of those tax reduction measures, King Hall?
So it's not very soon, but I just want to get back to our initial question regarding the tax measures that might be implemented. But our government taxes in terms of after it has given its budget proposal definitely depends on the strategic position of this particular budget. So I'll just give you for example. This Kazi Mtaani that has been added close to 10 billion and there were initially 23 billion. It is going to be paid in a salary range that is below 24,000. And that's the bracket that the government is trying to exempt, that the government is trying to say they won't pay. So do you want to mean that close to 30 billion will not be taxed pay? Definitely no. So we're going to see revision of the same in terms of pay, because a lot of this money that the government is trying to say is going to be distributed in terms of salaries. Look at what the government is saying. Some amount will be used to employ nurses that we run for 1 year, health workers for that matter. So majority of them might rank in between this range that the government exempted. So definitely there will be tax revisions towards targeting the amount that is going to disperse to the public. Then number two, the government may also be looking in terms of inelastic demand items, because that's where definitely, because the economy has not grown to some extent in terms of growing due tax bases or increasing disposable income for individuals to be taxed. So definitely they target inelastic demand items. Those items, despite what behavior of the the pocket of every single individual, definitely consumption will not change. So we're going to have some dynamics in terms of elastic items, and also pay taxes will definitely change. Look at what they're saying in terms of giving contract to local companies. So we can't push that amount of money into local industry, giving single contract to company, then we're saying we're taxing to 25%. Definitely it is going to rise. So if the economy peaks after COVID-19, then the CS has all obligations to return back to our normal rates.
But I mean, we are yet to beat that corner, are we? Because, I mean, we're just starting the discussion around the reopening of the economy. These measures were put in the month of April, and so it's proper to say that, you know, the impact has only been felt in the month of April and in the month of May. Do we have enough justification to say that, wait here, these measures are not benefiting the intended recipient, and so we should revert back to the old rate King All?
Of course, we not revert to the old rate immediately, definitely, because we are in what we call the preconditions for take-off stage for these post-COVID-19 economic decisions. So definitely we'll survive with transfer payment. We'll survive with these strategies before we start revising the rate. So it might take time before maybe a month or two so that we understand. Because then even opening the Kenyan economy and with other international economy or African economy not being open, definitely we are not doing business, because it needs interrelationship of nations. It needs interrelationship of economic unions for you to grow as a country. For you to say that you have opened your borders for economic growth, that it means other economy must have opened. So we cannot open alone and assume growth. We cannot open alone and assume we have opened our market. So it's a conversation that it's global. Then it might take time before we review these rates and be able to capture revenue from the same. So it might take time as the government tries to strategize around how long they will take before the economy opens, and definitely around the world opening the entire economy and trying to operate with the new normal. Yes.
Let's forget about this, you know, for a minute, and let's go. Let me take you back to the year 2009. I don't know where you people were, but I was around here and I was doing this stuff. The kazi kwa vijana. You know, this came at a time when the country was facing serious economic headwinds. You know, we had come out of a serious and a debilitating election. You know, violence, you know, was the order of the day. And there was serious drought. And so this was a stimulus package that the government came up with. And it was meant to give young people and unemployed youth, you know, something to take home at the end of the day. We all know how it all went. The whole thing was bungled. Some parts were good, others were not. Do we have lessons, you know, that we can learn back then that we should apply now so that we avoid the mistakes that we did? Because by our standards, if you were to look at, you know, the Kazi Mtaani stimulus package that has been rolled out by the government, it has a lot of similarities, you know, between, with the Kazi Kwa Vijana initiative back then. So, Elvis, what are the parallels, and how do we avoid the mistakes of 2009 now?
Yes, you're right. There definitely are similarities in terms of trying to engage the youth. We are facing a similar situation where a lot of the people, about 70% of our people, are actually in the informal sector, and you know, as a result of this, joblessness is what follows. 2008, 2009, apart from the drought and post-election violence, there was also the global economic downturn. Much as it did not affect Kenya as much, we can definitely draw parallels in terms of government actually putting in stimulus plans, which includes trying to get people who are out of employment into meaningful work. But one of the, I would say, very smart, double killing two birds with one stone that they have done is the youth are actually involved in sanitization, fumigation, and in a way that helps to fight the COVID-19 menace. And maybe just to add on to the other discussion in terms of the confidence Cabinet Secretary has in terms of achieving his numbers, there are actually other smart ways that he has put in place. So for example, whereas we are giving about 172 billion additional to the stimulus package, we expect to get around 535 billion from exemptions, taking away some of the exemptions that are seen not to have benefited the economy. And also to bring a lot more people into the tax bracket. For example, we are talking about the amnesty plan that is in place over 3 years. We had hoped that this would come much earlier, say effective 1st July, so that it actually contributes significantly to a part of the revenue for this year. But out of that, we expect to see a lot more people come into the tax bracket. So whereas he's giving away conceding on certain ends, he hopes to get a lot more people into the tax bracket. I think two other very innovative ways to increase his revenue is in terms of your 1% taxation. So your turnover tax previously was 3%, now it's 1%. However, we are saying this applies to a wider net, so up to 50 million revenue can apply the turnover tax, as well as companies that had not previously been paying taxes will now have to apply a 1% even when they're in losses. So we hope to have a lot more people contributing to the tax basket.
Yeah, and Kingo, I mean, we know, stimulus package is becoming, the new normal. The world over, from the United States to United Kingdom, to Brazil, to China. Countries are outlining various economic stimulus measures, in a bid to boost and jumpstart their economy in the face of coronavirus. But the question is this, I mean, if you are to go back, to how the Kazikwa Vijana initiative was rolled out, I mean, it was a beautiful document. I mean, it was a beautiful, initiative, with what do you call these? With fish ponds, rolled out, at constituency level, private institutions, being revived and a lot of money being pumped into these institutions. But the jury is still out on the impact of the Kazikwa Vijana. Number one, to the Vijanas, and number two, to the Kenyan economy. How do we ensure that the Kazi Mtaani initiative has a long-lasting impact on the Kenyan economy and the young people as well?
So first to respond that in 2009 I was a beneficiary of the Kazikwa Vijana.
Oh, you are?
Yeah. So we could dig some fish ponds and some land out of that. So definitely when you look at 2009, the political structure was not very stable. So the implementation of the same, of course, was faced by challenges because of political instability and because of the coalition government. And so many parties involved, so it was not effective, even though the economic stimulus by then government saw the economy grow to around 7%. So definitely it was very effective despite the economic challenges that was there and the structural challenges that were there. So when you compare it to currently, because we have political stability definitely and we have structures to execute, then we have this Kazikwa Vijana in terms of groups into different major towns, and we have structures for the same. So definitely it is going to be effective and people will get money into their pocket. We have also done it previously with this NYS sanitization around town. That was with the devolution ministry before. So definitely, and it works despite some political challenges. So the structures are there. So we expect it definitely to work compared to 2009, because currently we have some political stability and the structures are there to execute the same. Yes.
Yes. And then maybe just to add to that, there's obviously a greater focus now on fighting corruption, and that was one of the issues in terms of, is the money going where it ought to go? You've seen increased funding to the arms that work together to ensure that we are safe, as well as we attack corruption, ESCC, DPP. So I believe with the focus now on fight against corruption, it will be very difficult for any manipulation or any slippages for funds not to go where they're intended to go.
I mean, when you look at, the 8-point stimulus package, of key interest here would be the supporting macro, small and medium enterprises, by offering them about 3 billion shillings. And the other one is rebuilding the tourism sector, and this will involve supporting tourism businesses, community conservancies, hiring of 5,500 community scouts. How will this be rolled out, number one? How will the SMEs access these funds? At what rate? Or are they going to get it for free, like, the US has been doing, giving people free money? And these private companies, like conservancies, how will they be funded? I mean, and what is the criteria do you see the government employing in giving them these finances?
Starting with the support to SMEs, I believe there's a lot more that can be done. Already we know people have approached banks that is restructuring to the tune of about 136 billion of loans. So 3 to 5 billion is definitely not a significant amount to make an impact. But using the credit guarantee schemes, for example, where it is not the government putting in the money, but guaranteeing, lending, with the designated banks, we should see a lot more unlocked to SMEs. In terms of the conservancies and community scouts, I believe the route that government is using is about 2 billion that will go through the Kenya Wildlife Service, who work closely with the communities, the conservancies to identify those affected. But I believe most of the entities in the hospitality have definitely been affected by COVID. So it will be very easy to identify beneficiaries operating within a certain area.
Kingo, do you agree with Elvis?
Yes, definitely. I agree with him regarding the funding of SMEs. But there is one structure that it needs to be very clear in terms of this guarantee fund that is going to be given by the SME. So my view is that when an SME wants to get some fund from the bank, so definitely a section of that bank, a section of that loan that is borrowed will be guaranteed through this credit guarantee fund. So it will be a fund that will be placed. In case you want some fund from the commercial bank as an SME, definitely you go to request for a guarantee on the same from these credit institutions that you can get funding from the bank. So it is not going basically to be given out as money, but it's going to be a sitting fund that is used as guarantee for financing SMEs, MSMEs for that matter. So definitely it might not be fund that's going to be channeled, but as a security for the same. Because when you try to see what the CS did, he unlocks around 100 and something billion that was in terms of the basic reserve rate from the commercial bank. So that money needs to be channeled out to people. That money needs to be channeled out as SME loans. So definitely that structure of ensuring. And then what the challenge that the commercial banks might face in terms of this money that has been released to be lent in terms of the risking. And that's why the CS is trying to say de-risking as MSMEs. So what is trying to say that we are going to reduce the risk that commercial banks face when they're trying to lend to MSMEs. And that's why they are creating this credit guarantee fund. So when you go to a commercial bank as an MSME and you want funds, definitely they tell you now, we are going to give you like 10 million shillings, but 5 million of this must be guaranteed by the government through the credit guarantee fund. So you get a certificate of 4 million from this particular government fund, then 2 or 3 million you get from your assets, be it land, be it vehicle. Then the section of the same is what now is not secured. So just trying to create a structure to open out lending to SME and definitely money circulation. Yes.
You see, in the interest of time, I mean, we have to wind up. But before I let you lose, I want to find out from each one of you, and I want to be generous enough and give you about 1 minute each. I want you to look at the whole statement that was issued by the CS today. And I want to give you a minute to pat it on the back and at the same time poke hole on it and say, this was good, but this was a miss. And I'll start with you, Elvis.
His maiden budget, he was a man of the moment, for the match of the afternoon. But the key word, even going by the theme, is stimulus. So there's definitely a lot of challenges to revive the economy, revive livelihoods, and rebuild into the future. I believe the challenge for him as well is, you're looking at a lot of priorities that you have to fund. So for example, if you look through the budget, when you're financing various departments, the focus would still be on the big four. and as well as one of the emphases that was introduced is we are now looking at less than 10 years on our Vision 2030. So the platform for the period beyond Vision 2030 must be set up, in the coming years. So I believe a good attempt at not just focusing on the problem at hand. Yes, we had to make immediate plans to ensure we arrest the COVID-19 pandemic, but looking beyond that to stimulating growth beyond COVID-19 menace. So I believe if I was to give him a score, very well balanced, very well thought out, a bit of ambition, but yes, there are plans and incentives to ensure that he's able to fund the budget that he has come up with.
Very well. King O.
So I just mentioned a few positives and a few negatives for this particular budget. So one of the positive things is that it is very aggressive in terms of ensuring each and every individual in this country is really touched by this budget based on how strategically you're going to position yourself. So when you look at, for example, in terms of giving contracts to institutions or companies, local companies, definitely it's going to open a lot in terms of even employment, both corporate side, both professional and both local and kazi kwa mjengo and all those informal sectors. So it's going to open a lot for everybody. So I compare it with the economic stimulus that the Kibaki government brought in and really vitalized the economy. Yep. So it's going to be very, very crucial in terms of that. But then I have still a question regarding the same. We have around 846 billion in terms of debt financing. Then we have used 613 billion on development expenditure. So 613 billion is going to create revenue to fund 846 billion plus other cost plus other incremental cost that will come. Maybe because we have eventualities over the year and given that the COVID-19. So it has both a balance of both negatives and positive. But one thing that we have to be very cautious, and that has gone to the CS, it is about corruption. And we have seen this budget trying to address a lot of funding into security, corruption, investigation, National Intelligence Service, to ensure that when you close these loopholes in terms of corruption, definitely we are going to make it. Because when you talk about corruption, and we are talking about a budget that is geared toward money supply, of course we are going to have hardly hit on corruption when it happens at this particular time around. Because we would assume that corruption in terms of all kazi kwa mtaani that is happening, corruption in terms of all local companies that you're going to give contracts. We're talking about corruption on all pending bills. So it is going to be very dangerous to have corruption at this particular point. So locking corruption will be a success factor for this particular budget. Right. Otherwise, it is very aggressive budget in terms of money supply to the economy, which is critical to create a higher multiplier effect for the economy to grow as intended.
Very good. Gentlemen, thank you so very much indeed for your time. Your insight is highly appreciated. And thank you for being our guest on Business Insight. All the best. You see, the most interesting thing is, in 2009, when Kenya was going through a serious financial and socio-economic crisis, the man who drove the country out of that crisis was the former finance minister, Uhuru Kenyatta. And the man who is going to see this country off this crisis is the man who was then the finance minister, and now he's the president of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta. It's going to be interesting how this is going to pan out. You're watching Business Insight. We'll take a short break, and thereafter we'll be back with more stories. Stay right here.
Who choose to read their Bible daily, they become wiser and they become stronger than the people who don't read their Bibles. So when you choose hard, difficult things, you become a natural leader. He brings us to church to introduce to us another higher level of relationship.